Chapter 4. There were things that he did that had me baffled, angry, or confused, but my love for him and the need for him to love me kept me hanging on through most of it. During the times I was in Chicago, my mom would often call, and she'd be frantic because she would have made many more calls without my knowledge before she got through to me again. No one would tell me that she had called. This would have her in a state of panic because she wasn't able to speak to me for extended periods of time. I had to calm her down and assure her I was fine, when in reality I was not in the most ideal situation. He also wouldn't allow me to consort with the staff and mainly other males, and he would even forbid them to speak to me. It's a weird space to be in when you're cheerful speaking to everyone when you walk into a room but get nothing but deafening silence in return. Once a male friend of his walked into the studio and started speaking to everyone. It was a natural response to speak back to him. This made him upset. He told me I wasn't to speak to anyone and that I needed to keep my eyes straight ahead. At first glance, it would make you appear like a stuck-up bitch that only had eyes for him. A deeper look revealed it was for what it is. It was him controlling the situation, myself, and the people around him. It was also a way for him to control the outflow of information about him to others, and a reminder that you were his property. I didn't want to make him upset, so I just did what he asked me. Oh God, there it goes again with that. I did what I was told. That's what a lot of these girls did. They did what they were told. They were scared of the repercussions and what was going to happen after the fact. If they told him no, or if they got disrespectful, we know what would happen there. He would give them punishing, spankings, consequences. I recall one of a few times during a threesome, I cried. I just really didn't want to do it. Instead of him consoling me, he asked what I was crying for, then proceeded to basically tell me I was ruining his footage. He couldn't do anything with my tears. If I still refused, he often had sex without me, but with me on the other side of the bed, with nowhere else to go. Another time I broke down, he yelled that it was just sex. He had told me prior that he didn't connect any emotions to sex, which is why when it's over, he would make everyone get dressed. There is no cuddling afterwards. He would have sex with other women, but didn't trust them enough to sleep around them, so they would have to leave. Or we would often leave and go home, where we slept in the bed together. If you had to pee, he didn't want to hear it. He wanted you to turn on the sink so he wouldn't hear the sound of you peeing in the toilet. However, he didn't mind you hearing him pee and will attempt to carry on a full conversation with you while he was having a bowel movement. If that wasn't enough, he'd often want me to squeeze in the stall with him to inhale his foul odor. He was a narcissist in that way that had a crazy obsession with control, and often in a demeaning way. Oh, wow. This guy, I tell you. He once made a proposition to pee on me, adding he would love to pee on my big ass, as if to convince me to agree. Needless to say, I was not with that at all. Having a threesome is one thing, and dealing with the body odor was another. But to outright piss on me would be outright degrading, even though he didn't see it that way. I just uncomfortably laughed it off, and he never brought it up again. He had a way of figuring out where the boundaries were with people. He would push and push until he was met with resistance. Although he had made me feel like I was his woman, I would find out things from the girls that I was cool with since I had all of their numbers. I would know who was coming into town before he did. Through them, I would also find out who else he was sleeping with. I wonder, who are these girls, Lisa? Who are these girls, Lisa? I guess he was different because, according to everyone else now, he doesn't really let everybody mingle with each other. You know, this one couldn't talk to that one and that one can't talk to that one. But somehow, Lisa got a chance to speak with these girls and even exchange numbers with them. And I said to myself, so back then he wasn't really, I guess, too much taking phones or anything like that. I guess the girls had their phones still. You know, if he told them to turn it off, they would have to turn it off, I guess. I wonder. So he was the type of person that was really cheap with a lot of the other females he was dealing with. He didn't have any problems giving me money, but he knew that I was under the impression that we were in a relationship. I wasn't a gold digger, nor was I trying to be famous through him. If I had asked him for something, it was related to something that I actually needed more so than something I wanted, even though he still had to insert control over the situation. If I wanted to go to the mall to get some things, he had to see what I was wearing. If it was form-fitting, then I had to change. One time I ended up wearing his 2X shorts because I told him at the time that I didn't have anything to change into, which was kind of a lie because I just didn't feel like changing at the time. Since I was a size 2 at the time, I looked ridiculous walking around in the mall. But that was his way of ensuring you didn't really attract the attention of other men. He also didn't want me to talk to anyone there. But it's kind of hard to shop at times without saying anything to someone, at least to the people that work there. Really insistent on me not speaking to people in general. Not just in the studio or out at the mall. Even if it was with his friends, which I found odd. Most men would want their friends to like their girl somewhat if they have to be around them in a group setting. Not him. He'd want you to be the biggest bitch ever to them. Not speaking, sucking your teeth, or rolling your eyes at them when they did speak is what he preferred. What did he really think of his friends if he insisted on this type of disrespect? Towards the beginning of the... What did he really think of his friends if he insisted on this type of disrespect? Towards the beginning of the relationship, I did speak to a friend of his. And not only did he get upset, but he slapped me. I was very taken back by this, because in my eyes, I didn't do anything wrong. In the midst of my crying, he told me that he loved me, but that I just had to listen to Daddy, as if I were his child that he was protecting through discipline. He had a way of saying things to make a young, naive mind pliable and moldable, like putty in his hands. His intimidation factor and being the source of cash and other perks worked for the others around him. He was very territorial with the girls in his camp, such as his dancers and with some of the other artists. He had to always be the one pulling the strings. He had some working under and around him with a pay wage that intentionally made them dependent on him. While on tour, he was paying some of his artists only $25 a week, in which they were to use this for food, hygiene, and transportation while on tour. This left a lot of them starving at times. Since I had gotten close with some of the artists, I would look out for them by ordering room service in surplus. They became like brothers to me. This is how I got cool with one of the guys from the R&B group Talent, who would later hold a very private item for me. However, I knew to keep our interaction limited. I was at this time very cognizant of the rules, even though I bent them a little. Girl, you was bending them a lot. You was being sneaky, Lisa, huh? Oh, shit. She was doing her thing. She was like, what? I gotta ask questions, and she was analyzing everything. She had her eyes open. Even though she still fell for him, but she had her eyes open. A second incident where I slipped up and spoke to someone in front of him happened while we were on the tour bus. On the tour bus, we would often vibe and have a good time. It was often a party type atmosphere. I was having lots of fun, so I wasn't thinking about him not wanting me to speak to people. We were all laughing and having a lot of fun. One of his friends said something funny to me, and quite naturally, I laughed and replied back with something funny. He didn't find it funny at all. At this point, he grabbed me up out of my seat and took me towards the bathroom. I didn't even turn to look at the other people on the bus. I can only imagine their expressions or inner thoughts. I could only focus on where we were going and what was about to happen. Once inside the bathroom, he started cursing me out. I'm looking at him visibly upset, and I'm just in a frozen state. He then proceeded to spank me like a daddy spanking his daughter as he continued to curse me out. He spanked me until I began to cry. It took for me to cry in order for him to stop. Some females often look for their dad in the men they date, but this is not the type of relation they are looking for at all. Afterwards, he came with the same spiel as he grabbed my face about how he loved me. He said he was only trying to teach me that I should listen to daddy. I didn't have a father growing up, but I didn't need nor want him to be that. I wouldn't do the things I did with him with my father. He loved to be called daddy during sex. But I was thinking more in a sexual way, not a family way. He liked when I wore my hair in pigtails, like most schoolgirl fantasies. However, he favored granny panties or the ones with characters on them over the Victoria's Secret's underwear. I would buy plenty of underwear from Victoria's Secret's, and although he never complained, he would rip them, so I wouldn't have them to wear again. If he didn't rip them, he would ruin them with baby oil. If it was something he liked, such as the granny panties or childlike underwear, he wouldn't destroy them. He would often ask about his favorite ones to see me wear. He told me one day that men don't like it when you look like you're trying to be sexy, so I shouldn't go buy that stuff, meaning the Victoria's Secret type lingerie. He said that men preferred when your panties don't match your bra and they like cotton. Walmart type underwears instead, with turtles and other characters on them. So that's what I brought from that point on. So he has a fetish. He likes grandma panties and little girl panties. And Lisa decided to just continue wearing what he liked. Forget about Victoria's Secrets. She probably bought that on the low for herself to wear when she felt like it. So, our Smelly likes underwears that look like grandma panties and little girl panties. Now, the grandma panties, I'm pretty sure it has to do with his sister. I'm pretty sure it has to do with his sister. That seemed to really turn him on tremendously. He didn't really take them off. He would perform oral sex with them on. He'd only just pull them to the side. I didn't completely get it, as TV usually portrayed the opposite of what he said men actually like. For as great as he was with words in his songs and music in general, he wasn't much of a conversationalist. And the conversations he did have were not very mature. They consisted mostly of music, jokes, and sex-related topics. If he wanted to know what was going on in the world, he would ask me what I heard on the radio or have me read an article to him. The only other thing he was highly fond of besides music and sex was basketball. He could play basketball from sunup to sundown. He'd always have to win though, no matter who he played. It was an unspoken rule. Even when he lost, he won. It was really weird, especially watching others give in to him with no pushback. He did sign with a minor pro league back in '97 for 2 years. He wore the number 12. He had a home gym with a basketball court in it at one of his homes. When he was out and about, hoops was his favorite place to play. If he was out of town, he'd find a rec center or a gym in the hood to go to, which is out of the norm for a celebrity. But he had his reasons. So no matter where he went, he had to always find the gym or a rec center so he can play basketball and do that as he was traveling from city to city. This is his thing. He had a repetitive schedule. Chapter 5. The worst and still unimaginable things he did to me under a cloak of deceit and manipulation still leaves me disgusted, even now, to think about certain moments. Early on in the relationship, he had approached me about having a threesome with one of his neighbors. He told me she was 16 years old. Even though I was only 17, the scenario kind of put me off a bit. But we were close in age, so maybe she had a birthday soon, I thought. When I met her, she looked older, as she was really more developed than I was in some areas. Reluctantly, I would still do this threesome for him. It was kind of odd because it was as if she already knew what to do. She knew exactly how to please him. And it was obvious this was not her first time. It is more likely the two of them had maybe been together before. We had engaged in threesomes with this neighbor 3 times. One occasion I remember vividly. We had just had a perfect night out, a local radio awards show. I had a dress picked out especially for the event. He even faked an injury so he didn't have to leave my side and perform. He gave everyone the night off after the event, so we could be alone on our drive back home. In my mind, this night couldn't be any more perfect. Just the two of us together in his Lincoln Navigator. His tags read Holy One, which was ironic because I thought that this night couldn't have gotten any more purer. It would be the most romantic night we've had in a while. I felt like a princess about to get her fairy tale ending with her Prince Charming. We parked on the side and walked arm in arm to the door. As soon as we crossed the threshold, he called the 16-year-old girl down from one of the guest rooms. Instantly, the smile that once graced my face turned upside down. Then it hit me that this was why he sent everyone else home earlier. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach. I couldn't believe he was about to ruin a perfectly good night. It felt worse hearing the sound of him dragging this futon mattress from one room into his home gym as he summoned us both to follow him. Inside the home gym, he had a basketball court in which he decorated with a Space Jam theme. The theme that inspired him to write a song about him believing he could fly. To me, there was nothing inspirational about this moment, especially hearing the sound of the mattress made as it scrubbed the floor. He dragged this mattress into the middle of that court and set up his cameras around it. He would move back and forth to position the cameras or the mattress like a director aiming to get that perfect shot. This was another one of the times I cried uncontrollably. My crying only infuriated him because he said he couldn't use the footage for his perfect masterpiece he spent so much time setting up the camera for. I just had to get through it. I just wanted it to be over before it even began. The lights in the gym were so bright that the glare hurt my eyes. It was like many spotlights shining down upon us. He told the both of us to strip down. At this point, I was so sad and mad inside, so I was really not in the mood, and it showed on my face. Looking over at her, she looked numb, emotionless. She just did as she was told, kind of like a programmed robot. I could also see she was wearing the same type of cotton underwear, the ones he liked, and was highly turned on by it. He started off just pleasuring himself as he doubled and triple checked to make sure everything was set up properly. Because he knew I was upset, he made sure to pay special attention to me, trying to please me and get me in the mood. It didn't work. I couldn't forgive the fact that he had built me up that night only to crush me in the end. He spoke commands to both of us to position ourselves certain ways. He had sex with her, making her call him daddy, just as he did me. The night ended with the both of us moaning, louder and louder, as he commanded. The moaning turned him on. For him, It was both the sound of an audience for his performance and sweet symphony to his ears. While we were moaning, he was bringing himself to a climax until he reached his peak. Sometime after the third encounter, all the encounters happened over a 2-year span. The crying I did back then seemed like nothing compared to the crying I wanted to do as I got the shock of my life. We were both at one of his video shoots, chilling, when I noticed she, the girl I was told was 16 years old, neighbor, was just excited about something. So I asked her what all the excitement was about. She just casually mentioned that she was getting a PT Cruiser for her 16th birthday. In my mind, I'm freaking out and trying to do some calculations at the same time because he said she was already 16 at the time of the first threesome, as well as she seemed to know just as much as I did about how to please him. If she was having a 16th birthday soon, that means she was only 14 at the time. Did she lie about her age, or did he just lie to me? I believed that later as I grew to learn how he operated within the relationship. Plus, I was only 17 when he started a relationship with me. I learned a lot of what I did learn after the fact. However, I didn't want to freak out in front of her or anyone else for that matter. I wasn't aware who knew or didn't know about what was going on. Did her parents already know? I wasn't sure. No one talked to anyone about anything. All the yes men around him wouldn't be of any help. I didn't know what to do, but I felt so many reasons I had to help him get better. I didn't want to freak out in front of her or anyone for that matter. I wasn't aware who knew or didn't know about what she was doing. Did her parents already know? I wasn't sure. No one talked to anyone about anything. All the yes men around him wouldn't be of any help either. I didn't know what to do, but I felt for some reason I had to help him get better. I was convinced that over time he would, if I fixed him. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't without making a scene. I never did any threesomes with him or her ever again. I can't honestly say today that he never did any of it behind my back, but I was done with that situation. I never had any threesomes with him after that with anyone not older than 18. It was really causing me to have a lot of turmoil inside. I just had to talk to someone. However, with all the people around him being mostly yes men and basically orchestrating everything he wanted to put in play, I didn't know who that person would be. Then his publicist, Regina, came to mind. I would confide in her about him having sex with a 14-year-old. I don't think she confronted him about it or if she told anyone else. I just had to talk to someone about it. That moment really changed the dynamic of our relationship because it was revealed that he was a deceitful and a manipulator and that didn't mind having sex with someone that young. I wondered what else he was lying to me about. Turns out the man I loved was not rightfully mine to love at all. One day during a recording session, one of the runners came in to deliver a message. The runner told him that his wife was on the line. I was frozen with shock and trying hard to hold back the tears. It was an uncovering of the lie he made me believe. How could I really be his girlfriend if he already had a wife? I felt like nothing in that moment. He doesn't say anything to me in that instance. Instead, he grabbed the runner and pulled him out in the hallway in an angry manner. I could hear him cursing the runner out. That, ironically, I never saw again. There were no signs to me at all that he was married. There were no rings or signs of a ring. The only one he wore was the one he had on his pinky finger in a lot of his videos. We were together all the time from sunup to sundown. I would be with him in the recording studio asleep on the couch until he finished recording, and we would go to bed together. We'd only be apart for maybe a few hours if he had an errand to run or I was at the mall. Other than that, we were two peas in a pod. Where was this wife during that time? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He for sure had some explanation for it ready to tell me. He told me that she knew everything that was going on and was cool with all of it. He even gave me the number to their house, saying I could call there anytime if I needed him, and she would be okay with it. Testing him on it, I did call a number of times. One time, she did answer the phone. She asked who was calling, and I told her my name. She asked, was it for business or pleasure? I told her pleasure, and she hung up the phone. I then called him on his cell phone to tell him what had just happened. I was wondering if I had caused any chaos by calling. He told me that she was cool about it and that she didn't even say anything to him about it at the time. At this point, I was living with him. I was totally dependent on him and couldn't just up and leave with no money. If she was cool with him being with me all the time, then I had intending on staying. None of these were the smartest decisions, I can tell you now with no problem. Back then, I was just trying to make the best of the situation I was involved in. From that point on, however, I believe the runners developed a code to tell him his wife was on the line. They would help him, and they would tell him he had an appointment or an important call instead. He never really had to deal with anyone saying anything about anything, nor did he tolerate it. If a chick or anyone subordinate to him in some fashion did test him, he would tear them down so bad in front of everyone, and you would not see them around again. One night we were out with a group of girls at a nightclub. One of the girls said something slick to him. He would not let her back on the bus. Instead, he had someone give her cab money. But he left her behind in another town. It was hours away from where she was originally from and needed to get to. For that reason alone, he intentionally chose not to mess with women who were loud or had a big mouth. They could potentially be the one to spill the beans on his antics. He'd like to keep it private. I can't say at some point I didn't get slick with him too. But in that situation, I was highly inebriated. I had liquid courage on my side. One such memorable moment took place on the day we attended a party on a yacht. He didn't want me to mingle, so instructed me to just sit at the table, and if I needed anything, either him, or his assistants would get it. Testing that theory and being agitated because I had to just sit at the table, I requested shots of Henny. No one would check for my ID anyway. By the time we made it off the yacht, I was really tipsy. Alcohol is a bit of a truth serum, and at that moment I felt compelled to speak the truth on what I had been holding inside. That night we probably got into one of the biggest arguments we had. I was talking cash shit about him, how I felt about some of the things that had occurred between us, or the things he did. Once we made it back to his studio, he had someone take me to one of the rooms upstairs, which was like a mini apartment because it had a kitchen, bathroom, and a bed. I was locked away there to sit alone by myself. I could hear voices and music coming from another room below, which sounded very much like a party to me. They were laughing and having a good time while I was stuck in this room. It made me angry, so I called down to the studio several times, but he didn't answer, nor did he come to the room. Being that I was fueled with anger and liquid courage at this point, I decided it would be a good idea to play frisbee with some of his plaques on the wall. I tore some of them down and threw them across the room, which made a loud enough noise for others to hear. I remember clearly it was plaques for the group Changing Faces and the soundtrack for Don't Be a Menace While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood. I was the menace that night that had drunk too much brown juice, and the faces of those plaques were cracked and on the floor. Pure savagery. The security guard that was outside of my door let him know what I was doing. The security then let me know that his wife was also there in another room, and that I needed to be quiet. I told the guard that I didn't care about that because she knew about me, so I kept making noise. He finally made his way to the room, and we got into another argument. My mouth didn't care what it said. I told him the people downstairs didn't really care about him, and then told him they only came around because of who he is, to which his reply was to throw water in my face. The next morning I woke up really afraid. The night before, during the argument, he had talked about sending me back to Georgia, and I boldly told him to do what he has to do. I was basically calling his bluff. Plus, I ripped his plaques off the wall. I didn't recall everything I said to him, but I just know it was very heated. However, once I got up, he had someone tell me that he wanted to see me in the studio. I was afraid to go because I was sure he was about to send me back considering what had took place. Most people around him were yes people and never stood up to him. If they did, they were probably replaced. When I got to the studio, he played a song for me that he wrote. It was called I Don't Mean It. He told me that he wrote that song because when he hollers at me or pulls silly stunts, he doesn't mean it. The song was a way for him to try to make up with me for how he treated me. A lot of his songs were based on his experiences. How he treated me was foul, but the way I acted was also foul, I admit. After hearing the song and him sing it to me, I wasn't as mad as I was before. That was his MO typically. He never really outright said he was sorry, nor addressed the situation as to really communicate about the issues. He would always make it appear as if he went out of his way to smooth it over, and the things he did to you were very minor in comparison, and that's how he would have you see it. Kind of how a physically abusive partner will buy gifts. He'd write a song, sing a song, or he'd bring some celebrity around just to smooth things over to make you forgive him faster and without an actual apology. Our trauma and talking about our trauma was a commodity that bonded us together, but in hindsight, it was also a way for him to further dig his hooks into me. Playing on my vulnerabilities and insecurities, I had told him about the sexual abuse I experienced as a young child. which in turn made him open up about his own repeated sexual abuse at the hands of his sister that went on for years. He said she at one point had him stick a pencil inside her and they would perform sex acts on each other. The same sister was still calling him and asking him for money as if nothing ever happened. Oddly enough, he exhibited the same pattern of behavior, never acknowledging the things he did wrong to you, expecting you to just move on as if nothing ever happened. He would also confide in me about other things which made me feel uncomfortable. Which made me feel comfortable with him. Some things he confessed had me giving him the side eye. He told me that sometime before he actually started having sex with girls, he really wanted to have sex with... He told me that sometime before he actually started having sex with girls he really wanted to have sex with, he would get his sister's sexy underwear and put them on. He would then go to the mirror and jack off at the reflection of his own ass. He did have a big butt for a man. It was a bit narcissistic in a twisted kind of way. He also told me that he was really married to Aaliyah in 1994 when she was just 15 years old. I had heard rumors but wasn't fully sure of the details. I asked him if they really forged the information on the marriage certificate. He said that they did do that in order for the marriage ceremony to take place. The reason they married was because she was pregnant at the time. He was also afraid that he would get in trouble, but if she was his wife, he'd most likely not. They got the marriage annulled after she got the abortion, and at her family's urging. He also told me the reason her family never spoke out was due to the fact that the mom was sexually attracted to him as well. Plus, he would sometimes sleep with her mother behind her back. He told me he used to visit them in Detroit, and once the singer would go to sleep, he and the mother would have sex in the living room. Neither of them ever really talked about their relationship while they were together, nor when they split. He told me they had a pact, pins in eyeballs. It meant that even if they had pins stuck in their eyeballs, they still wouldn't speak about their relationship to others. All these things he would share to make you feel closer to him or feel the need to stick by him, nurture him even. It was all a game, even though his pain may have been real. The pleasure was watching you eat up every word and be more than ready to overlook any wrong he was doing and participate in the antics that ran through his devious mind. Chapter 6. There were good times in the relationship. The worst parts were mostly related to sexual components. Outside of that, he was the charming, fun guy most people who didn't have sex with him knew and loved. Outside of the threesomes, it was mostly just me and him during the course of the relationship. Even after threesomes, the girls would have to leave, or we would leave them. He liked when it was just him and I in the normal day-to-day routine. I was the only one he felt he could trust because I didn't want anything from him. Since I was the one person he trusted and we were an item, he decided to use me for a lot of things he had going on, like videos or being a stage plant for his tours. I would be the girl he would pull up on the stage every time after he performed Half on a Baby. In 1999, I was on one of those tours with him, known as the Get Up on a Room tour. Several other artists were also performing throughout the leg of the tour. The lineup included rappers Nas and Foxy Brown, as well as R&B singers Kelly Price and Deborah Cox. So, it was the type of show that definitely drew a crowd. On that tour, he had a scene in the finale of his part of the show where there was a bed that appeared in the middle of the stage. After he had finished singing one of his songs and was gearing up for the final song, he would sing the phrase, "Who wants to know what it feels like to be in my bed?" He would repeat that a few times to each side of the crowd. Then he would pan the audience on all sides of the room as if he was searching the crowd for someone. In the meantime, you'd just hear women screaming as he looked in their direction. The spotlight would shine on me, and I'd give my best surprised but excited reaction. He told me to just cover my face and shake a little to help with my ability to act surprised. Security would then come to rush me on the stage like we practiced several times before in rehearsal with his band and backup dancers in Gary, Indiana. Once I got on stage, the first thing he would ask in particular was my age, and I would respond with 19, but I was really 18. He would repeat back into the microphone. Then he would pretend to be carrying on a conversation as if he was asking me other things, but he really wasn't. At some point after the fake conversation, a bed would appear on the stage. Then I would strip down to those same underwear with the characters on them and non-matching black bra while he was singing the melody. Can you imagine being up on stage in front of a room full of people with turtles on your drawers, or the girl who got passed over for the girl with the childlike characters on her underwear? In the beginning, I would wear some lingerie, but he thought that looked too staged. He would always be wearing some see-through pajama pants with the see-through shirt. We would get in the bed and we would simulate a lovemaking session. He would start to kiss me. Then he would move further down. I would push his head down. But at that point, he would raise up to look at the audience and then pull the covers over us. Although at some of the shows, he actually was performing oral sex on me, unbeknownst to the audience, because he was turned on by my turtle underwears. Other times, we would just be under the covers being silly as we punched and kicked the covers up to further simulate lovemaking until the lights went out. We would be out of the bed and off the stage before the lights fully came back on. I also remember during the tour, Foxy Brown went from one of my top female rappers to one of my top haters. During the tour, she made a habit of telling front row guests that I would be the one chosen. I couldn't wrap my head around why she was intentionally ruining the show. Even with her dating Corrupt and having a certified platinum album, she still was acting as if she was jealous. For what? She's been known to have her pick up celebrity men. So why was she so obsessed with little old me? I later asked Rob about the situation and why it is that she was behaving that way. According to him, she wanted to be the one chosen. She wanted him to test drive the Il Nana. She longed to be the one he was spending his time with after the shows. But I was in the way. If that wasn't enough, she proceeded to act childish at the hotel where we were all having an after party. After a show in Detroit, she just kept riding up and down the elevator with her security, which were two big fat dudes. That was probably another sore spot for her. I, a non-celebrity, had more security than she did. She rode the elevator continuously, hoping Rob would have noticed her and invited her to the party. But he didn't. At some point on her way up, a friend and I tried to get on the elevator. She quickly pushed the button to close the door and said, "Nope, no scrubs," as it closed. The situation still makes me laugh like hell. I was the scrub at the penthouse that she couldn't, but wanted to get in. The China doll was acting more like a Bratz doll while she was on the tour. Inside the penthouse party, there were women everywhere, which was common for the kind of parties he would have, and really it was reflective of his everyday life. There would usually be little to no men there at his parties, but for this one, he did things a little differently. I recall him mentioning once that Nick Cannon always wanted to come to one of his parties, but he never invited him. He considered Nick to be someone he considered a lame. Nas was in attendance because he was on the tour. Plus, some NBA players and several other entertainers I can't recall, but still, mostly women. I remember those two the most because there was some interaction. A couple of the girls and myself had gathered in this jacuzzi tub that was in the penthouse. We were in our bathing suits having fun. I was sure to stay with girls to ensure he wouldn't see me talking with any of the other guys. He came over at some point and began to pour baby oil on us, and we were dancing as we lathered it all over. Somehow, both Nas and one of the players ended up around the tub, taking in the view. They were trying to consort with me and one of the other females. Nas leaned in as to make small talk with me, but I had to nip that in the bud really quick and tell him I was with Rob, so there wouldn't be any issues. It was a fun party overall. MTV News reported on the tour and the scene I was featured in. The fan must have put in her 50%, is what they printed. So, despite a hater's attempts, it meant I was still pretty convincing. When the tour was in Florida, he had us visit a lady's house by the name of Miss Pat. She had such a beautiful home. We parked the tour bus and went swimming in her pool. She made us all feel welcomed with a plate full of pasta. We also watched videos of the tour while we were there as well. After filling our bellies and reliving moments of the tour, we would soon be on our way and on to the next city. Other than fun while touring, there would be other moments. We often had roasting sessions that would be hilarious and lots of fun. He also made up a game where he would make a drink concocted of various things. He would put money down for the winner who could manage to drink it all. Those would be fun to watch. He'd have parties in between touring that turned into a full-blown concert. DJ Wayne Williams and I would serve as backup dancers, while he would be tipsy performing his songs. Since I often practiced with them, I knew all the moves. I recall one of the biggest and craziest parties that he threw in Olympia Fields at his mansion. It was a huge house party. Everyone had to leave their cell phones at the door in a basket. The power was turned off on each phone by whomever had the basket. So, what went on at the house party stayed there. They didn't get their phone back until the party was over. The goal was to try to get everyone to stay up the entire weekend. He had invited a ton of women, of course. Of his celebrity friends, he invited Baby, his brother Slim, and an R&B singer signed to their label named TQ. We all hung out and had a good time. The others were mixed and mingling, but I remained close to him. I still had a good time. The guests did a lot of bike riding, roller skating, dancing, swimming, and we even had a fashion show. Whatever you had to do to stay up the whole weekend, that's what you did. For the fashion show portion of the party, he had all the girls go to the mall and buy something for the fashion show. Everyone would model what they purchased. He cracked jokes on some of the outfits, which made everybody laugh. There were a few moments of drama, but just normal stuff that happens when you get a bunch of catty females in one room. It didn't last long though. No one lasted the whole time. People were dropping like flies everywhere. They were asleep on the couch, in the bathrooms, on the floors, by the pool. Anywhere they ended up when they slept overtook them. He once was generous enough to make sure his male staff received a special treat. He typically does not allow consorting between any of the girls and the men who were around. However, if it was girls that he didn't know, he didn't much care. He decided to concoct a plan to make sure his boys got sexed one night after a show. He told me the plan beforehand and how he was going to pull it off. I thought he was out of his mind when I heard it, but I just played along. Rob had invited some girls he considered groupies to the tour bus to party. He decided they would fit the plan perfectly. He told me that once everyone got on the bus, that we would go to the bed and pretend to start having sex, which in turn would make the rest of the partygoers do the same. Sounds crazy, right? Well, once everyone was on board and chilling, he pretended to kiss me. Then he proceeded to feel me up, and we started fake pumping. To my surprise, the mood we created started to spread. Except they were going a bit further. We excused ourselves from the bus and left them to their tour bus orgy. The guys were able to enjoy themselves that night, but usually he didn't treat them right or pay them well. Fun was definitely had by all. Unfortunately for the girls, they were booted off the tour bus with all their belongings as they ate their breakfast at IHOP the next morning, but not without cab fare, which he provided. These were the times he was at his best, and it was the side that pulled people into whatever web he wanted to weave. And it was a way for him to smooth over the shitty way he'd often treat them before. And then she has pictures from the tour bus. And then it says, "You think this was the outcome of having multiple people on the tour bus?" Nope, just one. He'd leave such a mess that I'd have to clean up before I could find the space to sit down. Chapter 7. Sometimes the highest highs are followed by the lowest lows. It's a cycle of life many sometimes do not recover from. After the tour was over, we resided at the Trump International in New York for about a month. During our time there, he would have a nervous breakdown. He didn't have the desire to sing anymore. He canceled all his interviews and other shows he was scheduled to do while there in New York. He wasn't answering any phone calls either. He was done. He told me that he just wanted to get away from everything. He ended up sending everyone home, with the exception of me and Frank Gatson, his choreographer at the time. He didn't send Frank home because he would be the one to get us the rooms and do all the footwork. The room we ended up getting for the night was at a real roach motel. It looked like it had rats, and probably did. It was definitely a hole-in-the-wall type of place. This new location would also be the last place people would suspect that he is staying in while they're in New York. He ended up shaving all the hair off his face and head. He brought a Jamaican dreadlock wig that came with a colorful beanie attached to it and some headphones to help keep him in disguise. We walked through New York City train station without people recognizing him. We took the train from New York to Chicago. From Chicago, we went to California on the California train. It was probably one of the most peaceful trips I'd been on with him. The scenery was nice. There were no other women, no media. The pace was slow, and the mood was normal. It was just us. All the while, his publicist was consistently calling both our phones and other people to find him. He wasn't ready to be found yet. We ended up at a ski resort at Lake Tahoe. We stayed there for another month. He recorded in a small studio and was working out regularly. We'd go to the movies and just chill at the resort. He just needed the time away from it all to regroup and renew himself. I finally reached out to his publicist due to the fact that she and I had gotten really close over the years I had been dating him. She was the only female I could really talk to on a daily basis, and she would typically be the one to handle things if needed, my hair done or a dress for an event. She was the closest thing to a friend that I had, and I didn't want to keep her in such a panicked state for so long. I told her where we were because at least for business purposes, she would know how to handle the situation. Once he was ready to go back, we left and returned home. Everything went back to the way it was. He was in the studio again, and it was a steady groove into the year 2000, until it wasn't. I missed my period, so I quickly took a pregnancy test to see if I was actually pregnant or not. The test came back positive. It was not the right timing and definitely not the best of situations to bring a kid into. I had to find the nerve to tell him because I didn't know how he would respond. When I did finally tell him, he had me take another test in front of him. That test also came back positive. My anticipation was for him to become enraged, but he actually had the exact opposite demeanor when I told him the results. He just asked me what I wanted to do with it. It surprised me that he was actually giving me an option instead of telling me what was going to happen. I told him that I wanted an abortion. I simply was not ready, and also in the back of my mind I knew there was indication that he could possibly be into younger girls. I didn't want to take the chance of having a girl. He seemed okay with my decision, however. He also seemed to just forget that I was even pregnant at times. He let it linger on for a while, at least until I reached 3 months before he decided to make sure I got to the clinic. It was almost as if he wanted me to keep it, because I had to be the one to remind him. At times, I was too sick to go anywhere, so I would just stay in my room. He moved me to the Ritz-Carlton inside the Water Tower suite. He then started to work from the room instead of going to the studio or wherever else he needed to go. He had everyone come there. His stylist was in one room, his staff in another one downstairs, and he would conduct interviews and photo shoots in the kitchen area and other parts of the suite. Although he never really said if he wanted me to keep the baby or not, he just behaved differently than I'd expect. He could have wanted me to keep it or just wanted to keep an eye on me. I'm not 100% sure either way, but I was definitely clear about what I had decided to do. He didn't schedule it until I finally brought it back up again. His assistant, June, made the appointment for me within a week and posed as my uncle when we had to fill out the paperwork because I needed a driver home after the procedure, and a family member poses no red flags. I was actually further along than I realized. I thought I was 12 weeks, but the doctor told me I was actually 13 and a half weeks, which costed more than what was paid earlier in the appointment, but she was nice enough to let it slide. I threw up one last time after the procedure, but after some ginger ale, soup, and crackers, I was better. I was taken back to my room in the suite, and there I laid in the bed alone. After a week had passed, that's when he called to check on me to see how I was doing. I told him I was doing much better, which I was since I was no longer pregnant. He asked if I wanted to come to his video shoot. I agreed to come just to get out of the room and to check out what he was doing. We met up in the trailer on the set of I Wish video. He told me he wanted me to be in this video. He had talent there, but he didn't want to use them because he wanted the elements of the video to appear more natural, and they were too made up for the look he was trying to achieve. I ended up being the girl on the porch braiding his hair. I attended the Fiesta Remix video shoot in Miami that year as well. I watched as Jay-Z, Dame Dash, and Memphis Bleak shoot their scenes. Boo Gotti, and Blackie were also in the video, and they're good friends of mine still, even to this day. Rob didn't want me to be in this video because it was a lot of other male celebrities in it. As I sat on the sidelines watching them record, he kept a close eye on me. Little X and his team were at the shoot. He wanted to book me as talent for future jobs. But before I could utter a word, his PR team stepped in to shut that down. He would do things like that, as if there was only room for his star to shine. Plus, it was a way to make sure that he would remain the source for what you needed. Any normal person wouldn't have a problem with you making your own money. At the time, I was staying at the PIED Hotel. They had an event called March of the Ducks. It's a 1930s tradition that had trained ducks marching from a fountain in the hotel onto a strip of red carpet. These ducks were guided by their duck master, and sometimes volunteers from the audience to a lift or elevator and raised up to the top of the roof. They would remain there until it was time for them to come back down to the fountain to do it once more. When I was at the vacation home in Orlando that he had got for me, I convinced him to let my cousins come visit because I was in this big house all by myself, and they would be able to keep me company while he was away. He agreed with my reasoning for this invitation. Then June made arrangements. He flew them down for a week. My cousins were used to doing whatever they wanted to do, so they would look at me crazy when I went to call Rob before I even made a move to go anywhere. They weren't in a controlling relationship, so they didn't have the notion. When they would sporadically leave the house, it would stress me out because I didn't have the control over the situation in Rob's absence. I wasn't the one doing it, but just to have them do it was enough. We did manage to have some fun, though. Unfortunately, my cousin got sick while she was there. She had a flare-up of her sickle cell anemia. She told me that the staff was treating her badly, so Rob and I visited her at the hospital on our way to the club to lift her spirits and see if we could tip things in her favor. She said the hotel staff definitely treated her better after seeing him and his entourage come to visit her. I missed them when they left to go home. I cherish the moments we did spend together. At the Florida vacation home with her cousins. I was so happy when my cousins came to visit me. It lifted my spirits to be with family. Well, that's the end of chapter 7. Our next chapter will be chapter 8. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share, and drop your comments below. And Diva, the Divine Light, is out. Peace.